Hello, and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the Haikyuu collab units. This is a new 7 Magic Stone RAM with a total of 28 units. The main highlights are those that make up the Karasuno team, which is considered to be on par with Rosetta teams. This collab also brings 3 other school teams, Aoba Johsai, Nekoma, and Inarizaki. Though unfortunately, these latter 3 are not as strong and thus didn't have much staying power. You can still tackle most of the endgame with these 4 teams, but again, the main highlight is the Karasuno team. I'll be taking a look at all of the RAM units, but let me know if I overlooked something in the comments below. And also please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Before heading into the RAM, let me go over the MP unit, Shimizu. You will need to get her to enhance the Haikyuu badge that you get from obtaining Hinata and Kageyama. Together, you will either need to spend 1 million MP or buy the bundle for $30. I don't know about you guys, but the $30 price tag for an MP unit is still really steep, so I wouldn't look into getting this with actual money. Base Shimizu is a decent cleric, though only having a recovery boost tied to their cleric active skill is not that special nowadays. At least, the looping RCB effect could be somewhat useful in newer super altitude dungeons. But seeing how you have to be careful about saving your cleric active skill, you might not always have that RCB boost available. Her equip is really solid for dark teams, which don't usually have a shortage of dark sub-attribute plus damage awakening equips, but the more options the better. In addition, the active skill is very solid due to its 4-turn haste. I would definitely consider picking up at least 1 copy of her, even if you don't care about the Haikyuu badge, as that equip is solid on its own. If you don't have a deep box, you might want to get more than 1, as you could easily run multiple dupes of this equip on your teams, as long as these do not mind the dark sub-attribute. Do be careful about your MP usage, as every single MP unit that Gonho has released has a useful base or equips. If you buy too many of this unit, you might be unable to buy some of the other upcoming units, and the only way to obtain them without any MP will be by spending $30, which again doesn't really seem worth it. Personally, I will be getting 2 copies and turning her into an equip. I do think 3 is overkill, but I have seen some teams using those as equips. Do definitely get at least 1 if you're gonna play with any Haikyuu team, so that you can enhance the badge. This collab has 2 descended units that you'll need as sync awakening requirements for some of the Haikyuu units. Make sure to pick them up if you'll be planning on using those teams. Also, make sure to pick up the Rainbow Event Exchange equip, as it might come in handy for some builds. By completing the Novice quest, you'll get the Non-REM version of the Karasuno duo, which is also needed to unlock some sync awakenings. Now, onto the REM units. These 2 units are 2-turn attribute and damage absorption voiders on a 7-turn cooldown. Both are pretty replaceable, as newer units are injured to a closer cooldown, and on top of that, Wood TPA and Water BDP teams are relatively weak at the moment. Both of these units do have decent damage output, but again, I'm not entirely sure where you can actually use them. At the very least, Kenji does have one of the few equips that gives you a Wood sub-attribute and Levitate awakenings. The active skill could be somewhat useful for its delay, but you could always put this on a transforming or Evo active skill unit like Frey, who only cares about the awakenings. These 2 other units do not seem particularly useful either. They could at the very least work as Binoa or Namiya leaders to farm Haikyuu event medals. Their equips will probably see more use than the units. Both of these give a damage boost to units that do not mind the water sub-attribute, and could also patch some holes in your team with the resist awakenings. Sugawara and Shirabu are also pretty lackluster in their base forms. Sugawara's 50 billion cap break to his right side ally is very significant, but you might not have too much use for this outside of farming teams. Shirabu cap breaks adjacent allies on a lower cooldown than Sugawara, but only to 15 billion, and this is easily overshadowed by some of the other units in this collab. At the very least, Shirabu's equip has a solid mix of damage and utility, and it could really shine in dungeons where you need both the recovery and damage boost. These 2 Karasuno units are seldomly used. Yamaguchi is a much worse Wood Misaka. Like that Dengeki unit, Yamaguchi changes the central rows and is able to generate a brick on a 7x6 board, but this system will require 4 Yamaguchis in your team to make them loop. If you go all out and only run haste units in your team, you could make a Yamaguchi system, but that sounds like a lot of effort for a very weak system that can only tackle very easy content. Nishinoya could at least fit in with the Karasuno team, but his active skill is easily overshadowed by all of the other better Dark Karasuno units. His utility doesn't really bring much to the team, and if you ever need that 50% shield, you could always go with the much better unit that gives you a big cap break boost, K. Nishinoya's buffs are not really needed in that Karasuno team. Usually these don't mind time debuffs, and even if you want to counter them, the Karasuno Duo unit will be a much better choice. And when it comes to recovery buff, if you're running Daichi, then you really wouldn't care about bringing more recovery buffers. And when it comes to the targeted attack buff, that's also something that the other units already handle. Nishinoya does offer a lot of skill boost and some utility, but all of that can be easily replaced with the correct equips. As I mentioned before, this collab brings 4 different teams that you can assemble. So now I'll go through all the important subs and leaders that you will need from Haikyuu to assemble these 4 different teams. The first team focuses on light and dark PvP matches. This team relies on 4 units to come up with activatable wards. 4 unit systems for orb generation is a pretty insane ask in this day and age, but at least some of these units double up with their active skills and give you something useful on top of the orb generation. For example, Kita will also give you a looping shield on top of the desired colors for your boards. He packs a lot of utility, but do note that his active skill does not give you a set number of orbs. So on the turns that you use Kita for your orb generation, you might be unable to deal any meaningful damage since he could give you fewer than 9 light orbs to make a BDP. Apart from again, the unfortunate random assortment of orbs, Osamu can tackle board shrinks, time debuffs, and attack debuffs, while also dealing with one of an enemy shield. But that shield break effect might not be all that useful, since more likely than not, you're gonna be popping Osamu's active skill every turn that it's up to get the activatable ward, so he might not save you any time against enemies that don't put that many shields up. While this equip's active skill might not be that desirable most of the time, its awakenings are still very solid. The equip is a really good option on a unit like the Miya Duo who will not overcharge it and would like the Levitate Awakening. This duo could have a Levitate Super Awakening, but they might prefer to run the Barrel SA to get more bulk in modern dungeons. The Miya Brothers duo serves as your cleric and cap breaker, but this, having a very important role, means you won't be able to pop them ASAP to increase your damage output. Some Inarizaki teams run 2 of the duo unit to be more liberal with the active skill and improve the damage output. But the big issue is if you don't roll 2 of these, you will have to make an exchange with 10 Haikyuu units, which is not something that I would generally recommend. Their equip is a little bit interesting due to the Light Resist Awakening, since those are a little bit rare and sometimes can be very useful for some cheese teams. The active skill could have a really low cooldown and it does counter HP debuffs and board shrinks. I could maybe see this being used in the regular and the alt UN Rush dungeons, since with both the awakenings and the active skill, you'll be able to better tank light aggregate attacks. The 6 nail orb generation is a very niche effect, but could be useful in the first floor of the Jupiter title dungeon, since one of the enemies there has a 5% super resolve and there's no leader at the moment that is able to clear the first floor in 1 turn without any nail orbs. Basically, any Inarizaki team will run Amatsus as leaders, and some builds might even run at their copy as a sub instead of a second duo unit. With 3 of those, you'll get a more reliable board since the post-transformation active skill will ensure that you have enough for 2 BDPs. With Atsumu, you also get to bypass both absorption shields, but this effect only lasts for 1 turn. Therefore, to better handle enemies with super resolves and absorption shields, you will definitely want to have at least 2 Atsumos in Inarizaki teams. Now for the Nekoma units. This team generally tries to match BDPs, hard Ls, and sometimes even hard Rows. These 2 units are sometimes used in the Nekoma team and pair with Kenma. Lev gives a 5 extra HP boost and a significant RCB boost, but he doesn't have any FUA and his active skill might not be all that useful. The effects aren't horrible, but I wouldn't consider them essential. Kenma himself also gives a raw HP boost, so if you pair them together, you'll have to plan ahead for gravity attacks. Tora has higher effective HP, a large damage reduction later scale, and provides 9 million FUA, but this comes at the cost of providing 2 fewer combos than Lab. The attribute absorption voiding scale is much more useful than Lab's, and it also gives the same HP buff. Both units have their places, but I would generally consider Tora to be the better option. Both of these equips are solid enough, Lebs for all the utility, and Taurus for the damage boost. Both work in Nekoma teams, but the latter is also a really good choice for Valentine Athena in being Noah teams. Kuroo is also a low rarity unit that can pair with Kenma, as he has a large damage reduction later skill. This is the first non-transforming, non-Evo active skill that has a 50% damage reduction shield on a 3-turn cooldown. His active skill also tackles attribute absorption, and this effect thankfully lasts for 2 turns. Therefore, enemies with super resolve won't be a huge issue. You do usually want a unit that deals with both attribute and damage absorption shields. Kenma handles the latter, and these BDP teams pierce void shields, so Kuroo completes the puzzle by putting attribute absorption. As with Tora, Kuroo also works as an asymmetrical pairing to Kenma to deal with gravity attacks. His FUA is a bit on the low side, since together with Kenma, you will have 14 million FUA, which is still very solid, but for some of the newer in-game dungeons like SN6, you would want this to be at least 16 million. Kuroo's equip is unmatched at the moment. We do have 2 other ones that give fire sub-attribute and levitate awakenings, but this is the only one at the moment that also has Team HP awakenings. Stacking those is essential for endgame, so it's not very uncommon to see 3 of these equips on a Nekoma team. Kenma is one of the Orpkin units in the collab, and he makes up a pretty expensive team. His pre-transformation later skill boosts eggs and part drop rates by a small amount, which is not too significant as Kenma does not have an asymmetrical pairing that gives a larger boost in the same way that Kageyama has Hinata. With 3 of this unit, you will be able to loop your orb generation, counter damage absorption, Capri adjacent allies, and get Skyfall Foresight. The orb count from the active skill is a bit on the weird side, since you'll be left over with 2 stray fire orbs after matching a BDP. I'm assuming that you're meant to use the Skyfall Foresight effect to Skyfall end that second fire combo, but because you will be most likely matching BDPs and hard Ls that take up a lot of space, you're not gonna have the easiest time setting up the Skyfall match. The 11 heal orbs that he provides do make more sense, as you can match a heal row and hard L with those. Kenma's equip is really solid. It gives a nice damage boost, a good amount of effective skill boost, some utility, and a little bit of bulk. I could see this possibly working okay on a unit like Minoa. Yaku is a fire cleric full of utility. He has a low cooldown active skill that also provides a 50% damage reduction shield, but this effect might not be preferable to an HP boost since this will interrupt any looping shields. Therefore, a cleric like Kohaku might be the better choice, if you can fit her. Though usually, the Nekoma teams pack enough hard Ls to not worry about a looping shield unit. The big issue will be HP debuffs, since those teams do not usually have a counter to that mechanic. But if you're playing with the Nekoma team, Yaku is pretty much the best cleric option. His equip is only one of 2 equips with a team HP and heal OE plus awakenings. The max cooldown is fairly low, so you could even overcharge it and possibly cut your dedicated cleric from the team. Though to the heal OEs, I would rather put this on a transforming cleric like Aurora or Hikari to boost their healing potential. Kenma and Kuroo is often the last piece in the Nekoma team. This unit's first stage active skill gives a large cap break to adjacent allies and itself, and the second stage gives a 7x6 board plus a 50% damage reduction shield, not to mention that both stages grant targeted attack buffs. Essentially, this is a 50% shield on a fortune cooldown, which is 1 turn higher than Kuroo, but the other effects on this duo unit make them better subs outside of Nekoma teams. I've seen this unit being used outside of fire PvP teams. That 30 billion cap break on a low cooldown is no joke. You will notice that the second stage active skill also gives a self-binding effect. This self-debuff is something that Gung-Ho has been messing around with lately, and I think that their intention is to remind people about the Hard L Awakening's commonly forgotten effect, recovering 1 turn of bind for each Hard L match. If their stars align and you run this in a Nekoma team and cap break them with Kenma's active skill and have just used the duo's second stage active skill, then this unit will not deal any damage unless you match a hard L and set up a fire Skyfall match. This also works with hard Rose, but I think that this team is usually more focused on matching those hard Ls for the damage reduction. Since this unit can have a few more applications outside of the Nekoma team, I might take a look at this exchange, but only do so towards the end of the collab and after making all of the other exchanges, especially if you're chasing the Karasuno team, whose duo could make better use of this fodder. The Aoba team focuses on water and wood TPAs. This team actually stuck around on some of the JP tier lists, albeit for a short time, and on some of the lower tiers. Takanobu is sometimes used in the Aoba team as your looping shield. Obviously, since this is a damage dealer and his wood attribute, you'll be pretty limited to where you can actually use him. Break teams come to mind, but they can make better use of Karasuno's, even though that unit's shield is 35% instead of Takanobu's 40% shield. With Karasuno's, you also have the benefit of not having to match TPAs to reach their full damage multiplier. So outside of this very niche Aoba team, Takanobu will not have a home since the wood TPA archetype doesn't have that much support. Still, you could make decent use out of this unit since they can also help you counter bowstrings. Their equip adds a decent amount of bulk and might not be all that bad in a wood, pro, or combo team. The active skill also gives you 2 effective skill boosts, though these are a little bit slower than a haste since you'll have to deal with the enemy animations. And the orb generation from the active skill might also come in handy in some ranking dungeons, since this gives you a fixed number of orbs. This unit is exchangeable and can take GFEs as fodder, but this wouldn't be my first option when it comes to exchanging, mainly due to wood teams already having access to Karasuno's and due to the fact that the Aoba team is not that relevant. Oikawa and Iwaizumi is one of the exchangeable duo units and is a staple in Oikawa teams. This unit's active skill cooldown means that you can system 2 copies to get a board 1 turn and an absorption voiding effect on the next one. Obviously, the cap break effects are also very important, and by having to apply it every single turn, you'll have the benefit of not worrying about any cap break interruptions. One thing to keep in mind is that the first stage active skill only cap breaks the ally to the right, meaning that you shouldn't run this unit as a helper because in that case, no unit would be to the right. The leader skill lags a bit behind other meta leaders since it only grants 5 effective HP, but this unit's team HP awakenings somewhat mitigate that, plus the 8x recovery boost will be very handy in super altitude dungeons. As with the Nekoma duo, this one will also require 10 Haikyuu units as exchange fodder, but because the use case for this unit is basically just Oikawa teams, I would not exchange for this unit unless you already got most of the other units to assemble that team. Oikawa is an exchangeable 8-star unit that can take 7-star GFEs as straight fodder. This unit is the only other Haikyuu leader that made it to some of the JP tier lists. It's not as highly tiered, but you should be able to tackle every dungeon in the game. This water and wood TPA unit can be system with 3 copies, but the usual team only runs 2 Oikawas. The Aoba team alternates between having pierce and absorption voiding effects every other turn. This does mean that facing off against enemies with any absorptions and super assault will be annoying. It's still doable though. The Oikawa team is solid on paper and fairly accessible since 5 out of the 6 members are all exchangeable. I really wouldn't see myself exchanging for this team and would only play it if I managed to roll every single unit. If you do happen to have some fodder burning a hole in your pocket, I might take a look into exchanging for Oikawa for his equip, as Levitate equips with haste active skills and team HP awakenings are a bit rare at the moment. Plus, this equip also covers wood OEs, which are often a bit hard to fit in a team. And now for some of the Karasuno units. You should keep an eye out for these since they can make up one of the strongest teams in the game at the moment. Tanaka is an uncommon haste option for the Karasuno team, but you might see him included from time to time. This unit can deal a decent amount of damage and handles bowstrings and HP debuffs. Usually the Karasuno duo unit has those mechanics covered, but that other unit's HP buff is only for 1.2x, so in some cases, you might actually want Tanaka's 2x buff. This unit also has some else, and if your build doesn't include Daichi, he could be your answer to assist voids. Again, Tanaka is typically not a core member of the Karasuno team, but he can have some uses in some farming builds, like the ones in the Tsukishima highlights playlist linked in the description below. Daichi is your only option if you want to fit in a looping shield into your Karasuno team. Well, there are other options like Muscari, but Daichi is on color and offers a lot of utility for dark teams. This unit's active skill also provides a recovery buff, which a lot of times will let you easily heal without matching heal GPAs. A lot of people don't often go out of their way to fit across in a team, but if you need to, Daichi's equip is not a bad option since it also provides an ever-useful Ace active skill, plus some bulk and 4 OEs. K is usually not included in the most popular Karasuno build, but if you know the dungeon very well, then including this unit can drastically improve your clear time by giving you a much higher damage output. Usually the typical team runs Daichi, so running another unit that will interrupt his looping shield is not ideal. But again, dungeon knowledge can allow you to clear a variety of dungeons very fast. Here are a couple of the top 3 fastest teams for the latest in-game content in JP. The fastest AU and Rush team in JP use 3Ks, and I believe I've also seen even some teams that run 4 of him, so make sure to keep all the copies of this unit that you managed to get from the REM. Asahi is a key sub in these teams, as this 7-star unit is the one that deals with absorptions in these haste teams. There are other units out there that have similar active skills like Tulia and Halloween Paimon, but Asahi is obviously the much better choice for Karasuno teams for his damage output, and this unit can also work in Rosetta teams. In addition to damage, Asahi also brings some bulk with his team HP and Heart L Awakenings. Usually Hinata will be your only source of orb generation, so Asahi's board change will come very handy whenever you need to match Ls to recover SS. Asahi's equip is not as great as the base form, but could still be very handy as a Levitate Awakening, Body Build and Cap Break, and Shield Breaking equip for some very specific situations. This is definitely a unit that you'll want to get your hands on for the Karasuno team, and the big issue will be getting the REM to spit one out. There are also some builds out there that use 2 Asahis in the team, so just like with K, make sure to keep all the units that you manage to roll. Hinata and Kageyama is the batch unit, meaning you can exchange for it with 14 collab units or buy it for $30. This unit patches a lot of holes in Karasuno teams. It solves HP and move time debuffs on a very short cooldown, albeit the buffs are only for 1.2x. That amount might not make much of a difference, but this is at least good enough to neutralize enemy debuffs. The board expansion effect is also very useful since your main source of orb generation in Karasuno teams can only generate 6-star orbs on a normal 6x5 board. In addition, the board change will also give you more dark orbs, which will be sorely needed since Hinata doesn't give you enough orbs for an L and another dark combo. Apart from bringing all of that utility with its first stage, the second stage active skill can turn this into a damage tech and can help by dealing with enemy shields. This unit is almost always present in the typical Karasuno team, and it also shows up from time to time in Rosetta teams. This duo is not that important for Rosetta teams, but if you're getting the Karasuno team, you will at the very least want to get this unit for the team badge. The equip is fairly unique at the moment, as it is the only later sub equip with the Levitate Awakening. Not a lot of teams currently make use of these equips, but you never know, this could be really useful in the future. The combination of Dark Sub-Attribute and Levitate Awakenings is extremely rare at the moment. Kageyama is the other orb skin unit in the collab, and he is essential for Karasuno teams as he is the answer to Awoken Binds. His pre-transformation leader skill grants a small power break drop rate boost, and post-transformation, Kageyama's leader skill synergizes really well with Hinata's. When you pair them up together, you can easily reach 10C by breaking up Hinata's top dark row into 2 dark combos, and Kageyama's recovery boost often provides enough healing without a heal TPA match. Kageyama's active skill gives a large damage cap break to adjacent allies. If properly placed, this can allow those 2 units to deal up to 240 billion damage. Since this unit is often paired with Hinata as a leader or helper, the damage from his active skill will essentially be cut in half since only one ally will be adjacent to Kageyama. Also, the fact that this unit needs to be constantly popped to loop all of the other haste units in the team, it will require careful planning in some endgame dungeons. For that reason, but also because of the damage output, the Karasuno teams often run 2 Kageyamas to have better coverage against Awoken Binds. Some teams might even run 3 Kageyamas total, since his equip is amazing for any dark unit that needs a Levitate Awakening. This could be run on someone like Asahi, K, and the Karasuno duo, and even though some of these might have a Levitate Super Awakening, your team might rather have the Barrel Awakening instead. This is only one of 3 Dark Sub-Attribute and Levitate Awakenings in the game so far, and this is the only one that has a Haste active skill. You will want to include a Tape Resist in your Karasuno team, since Hinata's Orb Generation changes the top row to Dark, and if you ever get tape on that row, you will most likely die, since you won't be able to match the 2 Dark combos to activate your damage reduction. I do think that the equip alone might be reason enough to get this bundle unit, even if you don't care for Karasuno teams. If you manage to assemble the optimal Rosetta team already, then this equip will just make it even better, as you often see this on Halloween Kiori. And if you got that Rosetta team, you might have even less interest in the Karasuno team and the collab overall. So if you buy bundles, you could just spend the $20 and forget about spending any stones in this RAM. Hinata is the BGM unit of this collab and now joins Rosetta as a generally stronger leader than Omnimon. Just like with Rosetta, Hinata is better equipped at farming parts in newer in-game dungeons. As an example, in the Jupiter Title dungeon, one of the parts has 2 trillion HP, while the main body only has 500 billion HP. So units like Omnimon, who deal multi-target attacks, will most likely kill the main body and end the dungeon before getting close to breaking apart. With Hinata, you could just make 3 orb matches to focus on the parts, and better plan when you'll be ending the dungeon. Hinata does a good job farming parts, as his leader skill gives you a small boost to part drop rates, in addition of also granting an XP boost. When paired with Kageyama, your team will be required to stack your Carbonic Awakenings. The XP boost is very small, but this is welcome in Alt U and Rush, where you can get 1 billion EXP, but can't leader swap someone like Celine. Post-transformation, Hinata has a 1 cooldown Evo active skill, meaning you can use each stage once as long as you run 4 haste units in a team. By doing so, Hinata will generally generate enough orbs to activate your damage reduction, recover 5 turns of unmatchable debuffs, pierce, give an attack boost to physicals, and destroy a shield every single turn. Even though that's a lot of button pressing, this is all necessary since the post-transformation leader skill requires you to use 3 active skills to get his leader skill attack boost. Even though this might sound tedious to a lot of people, playing a Hinata team is fairly easy, since most of the time, you're only going to be breaking up the top dark row into 2 dark combos. This unit's equip is really great for dark teams, and it's the first 6-turn haste equip in the game. You might not even be able to activate it on the first floor of a dungeon, since the cooldown is really high, but even then, the awakenings alone are simply great for any dark team. Just like with Tobio, even if you don't care about the Karasuno team, and now you only care about the Rosetta team, then you might want to get this bundle just to have access to this equip that is great on Rosetta herself. Now for a short overview of the 4 teams that you can assemble from this collab. The Inarizaki team is somewhat accessible since 2 of the core members are exchangeable, and the team often looks like this. So 4 units could be obtained via exchange, but I really wouldn't rush to this, as this team never really stuck around. This team doesn't have a dedicated orb generator, but you'll be relying on Atsumu, Kita, and Osamu for the boards that you get via their active skills. This team doesn't have a lot of flexibility, since outside of these Haikyuu units, there isn't really much support for light and dark PvP teams. This is not a weak team, since you can tackle dungeons like SN6, but I feel like you should stay away from this and not waste any resources making any exchanges for this team, as they will struggle in newer dungeons. The Nekoma team is built around 3 copies of Kenma, and since he is an Orb skin unit, getting 3 copies will not be easy. As I've mentioned, your damage output will vary a little bit whenever you use a helper or leader Kenma, but the fact that his cap breaks last for 2 turns helps mitigate that a little bit. Throughout the dungeon, the Kenmas will cap break 2, 3, or 4 units at a time, giving you either an output of 120, 180, or 240 billion damage. The best in-slot cleric for this team is Yaku, which you could also struggle to get since he is RAM only. Other units that are commonly used are Kuroo and Leb, who are also low rarity, so completing a viable Nekoma team will require a lot of rolling, with possibly a $20 purchase of Kenma. The only Nekoma unit that is exchangeable is the Nekoma Duo, which basically has a price of 70 magic stones. But seeing how you'll need to chase an Orb skin unit from the RAM, you will probably amass enough fodder for that duo exchange. the Aba Johsai team looks a little bit like this, and this team is very accessible since 5 out of the 6 typical units are all exchangeable, but I would really think twice about spending any resources trying to assemble this. The last sub is often an utility cleric like Ohaku, but if you miss out on that unit, you could run the Haikyuu MP unit, Shimizu. Usually, you cycle your units like this to guarantee an activatable board. Doing so will mean alternating between 75 billion damage on one turn and 144 billion on the next. For reference, this output is a bit higher than Omnimon, but the Aba Johsai team will lose a lot more damage against attribute disadvantages since most of the damage pings are either water or wood attribute. So even though this team is a bit more accessible and was actually tiered at some point in JP, I would not recommend spending too many resources on this, as their stay on tier list didn't last for long. As you all know, the main highlight from this REM is the Karasuno team. This is a haste system, meaning that you need to include at least 4 units with a 7-turn cooldown haste active skill to play it in the intended way. Once fully transformed, you'll at least be activating Hinata, one of the haste units, and Hinata again to meet his leader skill requirement of activating 3 active skills. The team usually looks like this. This way, you have Orb Generation, Unmatchable Recovery, and Pierce Hinata, a walking Vine Clear from Kageyama, Attribute and Damage Absorption Voids with Asahi, and a Looping Shield with Daichi. The Karasuno duo is a popular unit for the last slot to deal with HP debuffs and board strengths. Since you'll be hasting every turn, whatever unit you choose for the last slot will essentially have their cooldown cut in half. So someone like Kilika could be an interesting choice if the dungeon allows, since she will give you a 20 billion cap break for 2 turns on effectively a 3-turn cooldown. But in general, the Karasuno duo is the go-to option. This unit has an evil active skill, and the second stage allows you to deal 135 billion damage with this unit alone. Your team damage will vary by which active skill you will be using, but if you play it like this, you will be guaranteed to deal at least 120 billion damage. Another interesting unit, apart from Kilika to use for the last slot, will be the Kongo Collab MP unit, Punt and Necromancer. In a haste system, Punt will give you a looping 45% damage reduction shield and be able to void absorptions for 2 turns on effectively a 3-turn cooldown. Punt's future release means that you'll be able to play a version of the Karasuno team without Asahi, but in the meantime, he is pretty essential as there aren't that many great replacements for the absorption voiding role. Other Karasuno team variations sometimes use Kei and Tanaka, but those teams are a little bit niche and are mainly for speedrunning. Since we got access to Rosetta before Haikyuu, this team might not seem that impressive, as Rosetta teams also focus on dark combos, but her damage output is much higher and more consistent. Also, this might be a personal preference, but at least Rosetta boards are a little bit more engaging than Karasuno boards. I've been playing with the Karasuno team on my JP account, and simply breaking the top dark row into 2 dark combos is usually enough to deal with most floors, and that got pretty quick for me. Also, the haste aspect of the team means that if you're interrupted, you could be done for. If the dungeon delays your units by 3 or more turns, you might not have access to any orb generation, and without 2 dark combos on the board, you will most likely die. So playing with this team will require some careful planning. And if you add on top of that the fact that you also need to know when the awoken vines will come so you can type Kageyama, might be too much of a headache for some. So if you assemble your Rosetta team already, I really wouldn't stress much about chasing this team. If you have the resources, I would try a few roles since Hinata's and Kageyama's equips could be used to strengthen your Rosetta team. And if Rosetta teams are not your cup of tea, the Karasuno team is still considered to be on par with that Flower Fairy leader. But I'll warn you again that assembling the Karasuno team will be very pricey, even after buying bundles, since Asahi, Daichi, Tanaka, and Kei are REM only, so it could be a long time before you see your first copy, and there aren't really any viable replacements. Sure, Asahi could be replaced by someone like Apocalypse or Tulia, but you'll be missing out on a lot of damage. Some of the exchangeable units in this collab can have uses outside of these 4 teams, and might be worth taking a close look. Hinata and Kageyama sometimes see use in some Rosetta teams due to their HP and board fixing active skill. Their equip is also the only one at the moment with the Dark Sub attribute and Levitate Awakenings that allows you to leader swap. Kenma and Kuroo are great for fire BDP teams, but could be also very useful in other teams due to their interesting active skill. I really don't think that the other 2 duos are all that good by themselves, so I would only get them for their respective teams. I also think that this applies to the exchangeable 8 stars except for Oikawa, who I think has a great assist and could be used in various teams. Thankfully, he can take GFEs as fodder, so if you're swimming in those, maybe consider getting at least one unit if you see value in his equip. I do suspect a lot of people are short on stones or will be short on fodder to make any exchanges. So I'll recommend which units you could completely get rid of, but do take this advice with a grain of salt. I would still recommend saving at least one copy of each unit, but if you really need to complete the Karasuno team and need some fodder for the Karasuno duo, then some sacrifices might need to be made. Honestly, anything not here is fair game, though some other units that I might not be quick to purge are the Kenma and Kuroo duo, who could be of use in some teams, and some of the 8 stars since their equips could come in handy. Before purging any 7 stars that are not using Karasuno teams, take a close look at their equips, as some of these are pretty unique at the moment. Kenji's wouldn't be too bad on Freg, yet Osamu's offers a lot of utility and damage, even though their active skill is not that attractive. Kuroo and Yamamoto also have interesting levitate equips, but these have a fire sub-attribute awakening, so they might not be that great on non-fire teams. Again, this advice is only for those in a tight spot and mainly have a well-developed box. In general, you should try your best to keep at least one copy of each unit. Some of these Haikyuu units are fairly unique at the moment, so do be very careful and think it over if these will be worth the exchange. Now as for units I feasibly see being used in ranking dungeons, not one of them immediately jumps out as there aren't any that give any fixed boards. Maybe Takanobu's and the Miya duo's equip could be used for some rankings due to the fixed number of orbs that they produce, though these might not be the optimal choices since the active skills have other effects that might be unwanted and could cost you time. Even though this collab is a little bit late and not as impressive since we now have Rosetta, you can still build one of the top meta teams in the game right now and for the foreseeable future. But as I've mentioned before, chasing that Karasuno team can be a very expensive endeavor, so go into this RAM with realistic expectations. If the team is your goal, I would say that you have to be comfortable spending at least 500 or so magic stones to get a good chance of getting the whole Karasuno team, though like always, things could go south and you could end up missing some of the dark 7-star units. As an example, my JP account got extremely lucky getting the whole Karasuno team in a little less than 400 stones, but I didn't get my first Asahi until after 50 rolls. The Star Twine Fairy RAM is still ongoing at the moment, and I do think that generally, getting 3 Rosettas out of that RAM is slightly easier than getting the whole Karasuno team. And even though Rosetta teams ideally want to run Muscari, Halloween Kiori, and Phyllis as subs, there are a bunch of replacements out there. I went over Rosetta team replacements on my last video, so check it out, as this might help you decide on which RAM to pull. If you already completed your Rosetta team and feel like you can skip Haikyuu, I would advise to still do some rolls in this collab, since Kageyama's and Hinata's equips are really great to strengthen your Rosetta teams. If you buy bundles, you could pretty much just get them and forget about the RAM, but do let me know your plans in the comments below. Alright, that does it for this video. I wish you the best of luck if you decide to roll in this RAM. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and a special thanks go out to An Awkward Panda, B, Breastfeeding Obama, Dark Silencers, Eri Ryan, Eri Davin, and Links for supporting the channel. I'd really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
I'm Shoyo Hinata. And I'm going to kick your ass.